Welcome to God Day, and I pray that this time will be an encouragement to you as we go to God's Word and remind ourselves of who Jesus is. Throughout the Gospel of John, we see some very critical and important key statements that Jesus makes concerning his identity. These are all prefaced with the very simple word, I am. I am is used repeatedly by Jesus throughout the Gospel of John, sometimes in obvious ways where it prefaces a statement concerning, as we'll see today, I am the resurrection and the life. I am the true vine. I am the good shepherd. In other cases, it's there in the same word, I am, but it doesn't always carry through in our English translations. For instance, when Jesus is walking on the waters of the storm on the Sea of Galilee and his disciples are fearful and upset and in a place of turmoil, they see what they consider to be some sort of ghost or phantom. They're terrified. Of course, they see an individual walking in the middle of a storm on the waves of the sea. That would be quite terrifying. But he reassures them and says, "Fear not, I am." Now, in our English translations, it comes across as, and it's often translated, I am he, and often the he is italicized, but that's not a particularly precise translation because he actually uses the same expression without emphasizing a personal pronoun. So he says, fear not, I am. Also, when it comes time for Jesus to be arrested and he's going to be led out to his trial, and there he's going to go through all of the process that will eventually see him nailed to the cross. The soldiers who are there, along with others to arrest him, and they ask if he is indeed Jesus. Jesus responds, in our translation, generally it's put, yes, I am he. But that's not actually what he says. He very simply says, I am. Yes, I am. And it says immediately when he says that, many of them fall back on the ground, and there's a sense of shock and awe. If he says, I am he, it doesn't fully make sense, but when he actually uses the terminology that is the same terminology as is used of Yahweh, the personal name of God, then that is quite jarring, and that is quite significant. In each and every case where Jesus speaks of his identity, where he declares himself to be the great I am, where he declares himself to be before Abraham was, I am, where it says here in John 11, as we'll be seeing, I am the resurrection and the life, where he says, fear not, I am. He is attesting to the reality of his deity. Let's dive into John 11 just now. Verse 1 says, Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus, of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after this he said to the disciples, Let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and are you going there again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. These things he said, and after that he said to them, Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Then his disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well. However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Then Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, Let us also go, that we may die with him. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away. And many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Now Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? The significant authority that sees not only a recognition from others that Jesus is able, first of all, to heal. That after all, it is said, Martha says, had you been here, you could have healed him. He would not have died. Mary says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. I know Martha says, whatever you ask of God, God will give you. And she's recognizing and trusting in Jesus that he can and has the power to raise Lazarus from the dead. Mary, similarly, she recognizes that Jesus had the power to heal, but there's still this concern. She's weeping, and there's a sense maybe that it is too late, because after all, he has been dead for 4 days. And even according to some of the Jewish beliefs and customs that are not here in the Bible, but were traditional, that the soul would hover over the body for 3 days and then go into the presence of the Lord, or into Sheol. This idea was, well, he's been dead 4 days. There's no chance now. He's completely gone. The body has begun to stink. And yet some believed that he was able, and they continued to obey what he commanded, what he said to do. They did. Even all of that, before he has even raised Lazarus from the dead, points to the reality that people understand the tremendous amount of authority that Jesus has, the power that he has, the ability that he has, the great works he has already done. Jesus said to her, Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me. But because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Now when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, Loose him and let him go. There's a few things concerning Jesus that we see here, and concerning his identity as one with God. The first point, God knows. God knows the end from the beginning. He knows the end before the end has happened. He knows the beginning before a beginning has begun. God knows when we are well. He knows when we are unwell. He knows when we will be well, when we will be unwell. We see that in the first verses here of John 11, Jesus is what we would say inhumanly, abnormally acquainted with the reality of Lazarus' situation. Now, Lazarus is sick. This deadly sickness has befallen him. We're not told what it is that he had, but we see that Mary, who had anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. This is her brother. This is Mary Magdalene's brother, Lazarus. And Mary and Martha have both sent to Jesus saying, he whom you love, this dear friend, this one who is beloved of you is ill. Jesus hears it and says, well, this illness does not lead to death. But then he says something else. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. And Jesus doesn't respond beyond that. He doesn't go. He doesn't say, we have to drop everything, we're going to go. It says that when he heard Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. He loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So how we would anticipate verse 6 to read is we would look at it and say, he loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so he dropped everything he was doing and went straight away to Lazarus' bedside, and there he worked healing. But that's not what he does. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer. He delays his departure. There's a bigger plan going on here. There's something else that is at work. He's already indicated that this is for the glory of God. And somehow he himself, who he speaks of as the Son of God, he identifies himself as the Son of God, may be glorified through what is about to take place. 2 days after the news hits, let's go to Judea again. Well, the disciples protest because the last time that Jesus was there, he had essentially a lynch mob that was very set on stoning Jesus. In chapter 10, we see that stones were taken up to stone him. Verse 31, verse 32 of John 10, Jesus says, well, many good works I have shown you from my Father. For which of these works do you stone me? And the Jews answered him, saying, for a good work we do not stone you, but for blasphemy, and because you, being a man, make yourself God. You see, they knew what he was claiming to be. The individuals who opposed Jesus knew and understood that he was claiming to be fully God, though also fully man. And so what we see is in what follows another instance of Jesus showing who he is, not just speaking, but as he always did, as he always does, showing who he is. Now, he gets up and he's going to go, and the disciples say, well, they tried to stone you last time, don't you remember? That didn't go so well. Do you really want to go? Then Jesus says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. I go to awaken him. The disciples still not convinced by this situation, and most certainly concerned also for their own lives and their own health and safety and well-being, discourage Jesus further. Well, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he's going to be okay. He's going to recover. Is there really any need to go and see Lazarus? It's dangerous. It's too risky. We're stepping out in this particular unsafe zone, and we're not really keen on this plan. They don't realize that Jesus has spoken of his death. Jesus knows because God knows. Lazarus has died. Lazarus has been dead. And by the time they arrive to see Mary and Martha, he has been in the tomb for 4 days. So Thomas, the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us go, that we may die with him. So there's this still that they're going to kill you, Jesus. They're going to come after you. This isn't a good plan. Finally, they say among themselves, Thomas says, let's go with Jesus that we may die with him. God knows the end from the beginning. He knows the day of death. He knows the day of Lazarus's death. He knows the day of your death. He knows the day of my death. God knows. Jesus knew that Lazarus was dead. Although he had only heard that he was ill, although he had only been told that he was ill, he waited, knowing that there was something bigger afoot here. He waits till he's dead to go and see. He also knows that his time has not yet come. His time draws nigh, but it has not yet come. His visitation of Lazarus will set further gears in motion that will eventually lead to his betrayal and the crucifixion, which necessitated, which was eventually leading to, of course, the resurrection, in which our hope is. But we see at this point he knows that this is not the end. So he steps out and he goes to see Mary and Martha. Now, they greet him and are understandably and obviously grieved. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Difficult words. Lord, if you had come, why didn't you come right away? Lord, if you had been here, Martha says, my brother would not have died. Mary repeats the same. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You can compare the two verses. Verse 21, Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Mary the same in verse 32. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. If only you had been here. And I dare say that there are many who cry out similarly when a loved one dies. Lord, where are you? Why have you not done something? Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Sometimes there's this human, sinful but human, anger. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. It insinuates that God does not care, or that God has not fully appreciated the gravity of the situation, and that perhaps he could have interacted and intervened in some amazing way that could have halted the progression, the course of events transpiring in an individual's sudden demise. But God knows, and God does care. Jesus finds Lazarus has been in the tomb 4 days. He hears these, are they accusations? In some way they are. I think we can agree. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But there's also testimony as well. There's an accusation coupled with an affirmation. On Martha's case, Martha says, but even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. So there's an accusation coupled with an affirmation that Jesus is able, and a recognition, despite the accusation, that he must care. He does care. I don't understand why Jesus has not come sooner. I don't understand why he delayed. I don't understand what's gone on, but I understand there must be a reason, and I understand that even now, dead and stinking in the grave for 4 days, even now, something powerful can take place. Jesus responds, your brother will rise again. Now, for Martha, this is a sure and certain hope, and this is wonderful. This is the reality. Yes, I know that my brother will rise again. I know on the day of resurrection, at the last day, I know that he will rise again. I know. That's not what Jesus is saying, though. Your brother will rise again. I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Now Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. He uses that expression again. That personal name of God is translated in Greek. It is ego eimi. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, yet he shall live. Whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And then Martha affirms and she acclaims, yes, Lord, I believe you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. This is a bold affirmation of the identity of who Jesus is. When she said these things, she goes her way. She calls Mary. She's still not emerged. She's sitting in the typical form and fashion of mourning. Now, Jesus has not yet come into the town, but is in the place where Martha has met him. Now there are others who are comforting Mary, and they see that she's going out, and they follow, and they think, well, she's going to mourn more at the tomb. And they've been spending time sitting. They've been spending time in the fashion of mourning. They all see Jesus. They see Mary fall down at Jesus' feet, saying again that accusation. If you had been here, he wouldn't have died. God knows and God cares. It says even in those short words, the shortest verse in your Bible, verse 35, Jesus wept. Where have you laid him? Notice Jesus doesn't rebuke Martha. He doesn't rebuke Mary. He listens to Martha and he listens to Mary. He doesn't speak of them or to them harshly, or in this case is in any way faithless. He simply listens to them and asks questions. He does not react to the sense of accusation that he was absent, that he was somehow missing in action. He does not respond with protest. He simply listens and shows care and love because he does know and he does care. Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. The care of Jesus evident and manifest even in this time and situation of grief. The deity of Jesus, the humanity of Jesus, on clear display for all to see in this passage. Could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying? But remember, we've also seen that this is one who's not only opened the eyes of the blind, he is able to raise from the dead. Jesus cares about our concerns. He does. Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Elsewhere, we are urged, cast your cares upon the Lord, knowing he cares for you. It seems jarring, and some might find it borderline blasphemous to say, God cares about your concerns. He cares about your burdens. He cares about your cares. He really and truly does. He knows and he cares. Jesus urges us to come to him. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Elsewhere, cast your cares upon the Lord, knowing he cares for you. This initial approach by Mary and Martha, though through a messenger, indicates they know that Jesus cares for Lazarus. Jesus, come, Lazarus, the one whom you love, he's sick. They know that Jesus cares and that he wants to be there. Come for Lazarus. They trusted him to be concerned about their concern. He cares about your concerns. He also cares about your questions. The disciples question why Jesus is going to Bethany. He was, after all, threatened by those who did not desire his message there previously. They picked up stones to stone him. But Jesus is patient and he answers. He doesn't rebuke them. He doesn't get his back up with them. He doesn't get angry with them, though one might look and say the amount of questions they ask could be rather tedious at times. But the disciples, when Jesus answers back and responds, they answer back and they question whether Lazarus' situation is all that bad. Jesus cares and he answers. Mary questions. She asserts Lazarus would have lived if Jesus was there. She weeps, and rather than protesting or questioning Mary's faith, what does he do? He weeps with her because he cares, because God cares. People ask why Jesus didn't keep Lazarus from dying. Jesus listens. He hears their questions. He knows their hearts. He knows what's going on in their minds. He cares, and he weeps. And they know that he cares. But this isn't where it ends. Jesus doesn't stop there. Jesus is moved again and he arrives at the place of the tomb, and we see this very, very typical ancient setup. There's a cave and a stone is laying against it. Take away the stone, Jesus says. He's been there 4 days. He stinks. Please, this is difficult. This will just open up. Is there any point? You don't want to see that. You don't want to smell that. You don't want to experience. Come on, just leave it. He's been there for 4 days. Jesus knows. Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? Jesus cares. And more than that, Jesus saves. So they took away the stone. Jesus lifts up his eyes and he cries out, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. This is what he was talking about. This is what he was saying, that there's glory that's going to come through this. This sickness is not unto death in a full and final way, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. He says, Lazarus, come forth. It is appointed to man to die once, and after this comes judgment. But the beautiful message of the gospel is not only that God knows about our sin and its consequence, which is death. God not only cares about the state we are in a sympathetic or empathetic way, He, being the only one who can do something about it, does something about it and makes a way of salvation through Jesus Christ. Here the question is asked of Jesus, where were you when Lazarus died? Why were you not there? He would have lived had you not shown up. Only a short time later, Jesus, nailed to a cross, would cry out with the rest of broken humanity, my God, why have you forsaken me? As others would mock, saying, if God was with him, why doesn't he show up? It's here that we see what begins the reality that God sees, he knows, he cares, and he saves. He himself, as Lazarus was raised, is raised forever.